Okay. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. So I'd like to relate a story about Prabhupada's books. This was told to us recently by Shruti Kirti, and you've probably heard that Prabhupada said, I didn't write these books, but Krishna wrote these books. But in this story, Shruti Kirti said, Prabhupada said that Krishna is sitting on my shoulder dictating. Hare Krishna. So that means reading Prabhupada's books is like Krishna talking to you. Now, I would like to express my personal realization of Prabhupada's books because I see a much different effect on people who are regularly reading than I see the effect that it has upon people who regularly read as opposed to those who don't. And in seeing that in my own experience with Prabhupada's books, I became convinced that in the process of bhakti that Prabhupada has given us, that his books were one of the most essential ingredients. Just like when you're cooking, you need certain ingredients. If you're missing, you're making ice cream without cream. How do you do that? Or without milk? Or you can't. It's an essential ingredient. Or you need sugar or something to sweeten it. So, in the process of bhakti that Prabhupada has given us, his books play an essential role. Of course, we always say the holy name, but we don't chant purely, and these other processes purify us so that we can chant more purely. So it's synergistic. We need many things. We need Sangha. We need deity worship. We need the Dham. We need the holy name. And we need to hear. But you could hear so many things, and all are purifying and important, but Prabhupada's books are of special significance because they were part of his process for us. And sometimes, if he saw the devotees weren't understanding the philosophy or they didn't know something that was quite basic, he would be upset. Or they would ask a question, and a question they shouldn't have asked because they should have known the answer if they were reading his books. And he would say, why are you asking this? Aren't you reading my books? Prabhupada was once asked, in our particular case, because we can't ask you questions directly, what does it mean that we should inquire from the Guru? And Prabhupada said, read my books. That's the inquiry. So, one time he told the Sankirtan devotees, these books, we didn't write these books for making money. We didn't write these books for making business. The primary reason we wrote them was not for selling, but it was for you, for your education. So, I don't think Prabhupada would have... Of course, Prabhupada wanted all the scholars in the world to read his books. And of course, he wanted them widely distributed, but you can see from reading them, many aspects or many portions of the book are primarily for those practicing devotional service. So, this is important for us to understand. Famous conversation, after you die, who will be your successor? I will never die. I live forever in my books. If you want to know me, read my books. And that's an interesting statement. Because it would make more sense materially to say, if you want to know me, read my biography. But, if you want to know me, it is to know Krishna philosophy. So read my books and you'll know me, quote unquote. You'll know me and my mission, what I came to get. What I came to give. And what I represent. And what I embody. So you read my books, you'll understand that. Now, Prabhupada said, when he wrote his books, he needed a very peaceful environment because he had to choose every word carefully. And why would he have to be so careful? Because he had to make it understandable to people who have little capacity to understand, and people who are highly conditioned by the modes of nature. So he had to choose words carefully so we could understand things which are very transcendental, or somewhat transcendental, or very philosophical, for the common man to understand. Because Bhagavatam is considered the cream of the Vedas. And traditionally, people like ourselves, unless we were raised as Brahmins and initiated, we wouldn't be allowed to read the Vedas. Even previously, women didn't. It was only men of the higher class that would go to Gurukul, and then they would get initiated, and then they were allowed access to the Vedas. So, and that's just the Vedas. That's not Bhagavatam, which is cream or essence. And Bhagavatam is meant for the Paramhamsa, so it's sometimes called the Paramhamsa Samhita, and that's what Prabhupada is giving to us. So, us ordinary people. Yes. So, another realization that I've had in reading Prabhupada's books is based on a statement. And Prabhupada said, the intelligence is the next door neighbor to the soul. It's interesting. Like, if the intelligence has the capacity to bring us closer and closer to Krishna. It's the intelligence is when things are understood by the intelligence, or spiritual knowledge is understood by the intelligence. It's almost realized. It's like that close. It's as close as you can get to spiritual realization. So, when we're reading philosophy, any philosophy, it's appealing to the intelligence, to strengthen, especially, of course, we're talking about Prabhupada's books, which are more than material philosophy. But, so it's purifying the intelligence, it's strengthening the intelligence. And what we see happening today is people don't think much. And as we were talking last night or the night before, how, it was the night before, Wednesday night, how in our society today, people are being manipulated by social media, by marketing, by politicians, and so forth. And so their goal is that you don't think much, because the less you think, the more you can be controlled. And we were mentioning how kids are all raised to buy brands and spend money because it gives them some self-esteem to wear a brand that's respected. And they don't realize that they're being manipulated to spend money, 2 or 3 times more money on something, just because it's got a logo on it. So, living in this environment, it's a very, what we say, it dumbs us down. So we don't think, like, we're all going to die, right? And we're all living like we're not going to die. That's being dumbed down. We're all living and we're very happy and everything is nice, and we don't think about why I'm alive and the value of things and so forth. So what Prabhupada's books are doing is it's not only clarifying intelligence, it's also giving intelligence. Because sometimes Prabhupada would joke, they would say, Prabhupada, they say we're brainwashing. He said, no, we're brain giving. There's no brain to wash. So, in other words, that people are living on par with animals. So, what are you going to wash? You first have to give the brain. So, that was his idea. Through education, we're giving a brain, we're giving intelligence so people can actually think clearly and not be so bewildered. Maya is very powerful. So we do something, it doesn't work, it doesn't make us happy. We do it again, it doesn't work, it doesn't make us happy. We do it again, and we keep going our whole life like this. That's a dumbing down. So what Prabhupada is doing is he's telling us the reality, so you don't have to do that to understand. You don't have to suffer. You can just read and say, this is the wrong direction, this doesn't work, this is what works. this is where you should go. Not only that, what's very interesting about Prabhupada's books is he explains how Maya is working on us. Because if someone is cheating you and you don't know it, then you're, as we say in America, a sitting duck. You say that in India? Sitting duck. Sitting ducks just float and you can shoot them. Sitting duck means you're easily shot. So if a guy comes with a gun and you're a duck and you don't know what the gun is and that he's going to shoot you, you're a sitting duck, he'll shoot you. So in many ways we're sitting ducks to Maya. And so in Prabhupada's books, he's describing, this is how Maya works. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, now I can see. This is how I'm being illusioned or entangled. Or I can see this, why this doesn't work, or why this is bewildering, or why this won't make me happy, or how this is not Krishna's desire, or how that's taking me away from Krishna. The whole plan is there. You can read it. You know, if you're fighting a battle and you know the enemy's strategy, they can't get you because you know where they're coming, how they're coming, when they're coming, right? So similarly, Prabhupada is telling us where Maya is coming, how she fights, what her weapons are, so you can be prepared. So that's very important. And if we don't know that, then how do we get out of Maya? Because we don't even know what's happening to us. Right? It's kind of like we've been drugged. And we're not fully conscious and we're being taken advantage of. You know, like we go to India and Prabhupada used to say, you Americans, the foreigners are called damn cheap babas. Because that means wherever they go shopping, whatever price they're given, even though the guy marked it up 2 or 3 times, by American standards, it's cheap. So you say, how much is this? And he double, at least when I first went to India, it was double. I think now they triple it. Or I think after doubling it and people saying, oh, that's a good price and buying it, they thought, oh, I should triple. So I don't know what they're up to now, but something like double or triple. And usually in America it was much more expensive, so even double or triple was cheap because it's a little shop. They're not paying for advertising. They're not paying for this big department store. They're just paying, what the product is worth. And so they give you the price double or triple, and you'd say, wow, that's damn cheap. So damn cheap babas. And then you would pay double or triple, and then the store owner was very happy. And then you go back to your Indian friend's home, and just out of curiosity, they ask you, how much did you pay for that? And you say, I paid 300 rupees. They go, that's only 100 rupees. He cheated you. I go, really? The 300 is so cheap. No, it's 100 rupees. And he was telling you 300 is a deal. Normally 600, right? So now you go home, your Indian friend tells you, go, okay, now I know. So next time he says 300, you say, I'll give you 50. He'll come down to 150. He'll go give you 60. He'll go, okay, 100. Then you get it for your price. And you already know it's 100. So you know how to deal with the enemy. So that's one of the things that's happening in Prabhupada's books. He's showing us how we're being cheated by Maya, by politicians, by education, and so on and so forth. So we need to know these things. And as I was saying before, there's the power of just clarifying the intelligence through transcendental sound vibration. And then, of course, Prabhupada says in the beginning of Bhagavatam, by hearing Bhagavatam, you're associating with Krishna. It's not different than Krishna. So there's that aspect. You're actually associating with Krishna and his pure devotees through hearing. Prabhupada said there's no difference between reading the Bhagavatam and associating with Krishna, which is, it will take time to realize. But we realize that to some degree through the purification of Bhagavatam. And the purification of just the sound, even you don't understand it, hearing. And the fact that your hearing means you're not watching television. So there's also that factor. Even if you sit and read and you don't understand one word, well, at least you're not doing anything bad. You could be doing a lot worse, right? You could be wasting time with something. And then you might think, well, what's the use of reading if I don't understand? But actually, even if you don't understand, aside from the fact that you're hearing Bhagavatam and it's purifying, sometimes you have to read what you don't understand many, many times in order to understand. So there's never a loss, even if you don't understand. And the Nectar of Devotion came out in 1970. At the time it first came out, I'd been a devotee 8 months. Krishna book came out when I'd been a devotee 8 months. Prior to that, we had first canto Bhagavatam, but we weren't doing Bhagavatam classes because none of the devotees felt qualified to give class on Bhagavatam to understand it. We just were reading Bhagavad Gita, and we had TLC, but that was just reading for fun without understanding much, because we were just grappling with Bhagavad Gita. So we started reading Nectar Devotion. Obviously, the beginning of it is understandable, but later on it was less understandable, and later on it was not understandable. Much of it was not understandable. And one devotee wrote Prabhupada and said, like, should we read this? You know, Rasa Bhas and stage of Bhava and Prema. It was very, very foreign for us, very transcendental. Nothing like anything of this world. And Prabhupada said, just read it. And if you don't understand it, read it again. If you don't understand, read it again. And, you know, something will start to wear off. Because it's familiar, you're becoming familiar with a different genre of literature, a different realm, and so you're starting to learn about it. This is how the spiritual world operates. This is beyond the modes of nature. These are how the Mahabhagavats operate. And there are many, many lessons in Prabhupada's books that you're not going to get the first time. You're just maybe grasping with some ideas. But as you go, you start to read more, you understand more of the context, you understand more of philosophy, then you get more from it, you can see more. So that's the importance of reading. Another experience I have is a devotee, generally is my experience, a devotee who is, not in every case, but this is often true, a devotee who's experiencing difficulty in their Krishna consciousness generally is not reading much or at all. And often when I tell them, they had asked me what they should do about their problem, I advise them, well, how much you're reading? And they'll say very little. And I say, well, can you read an hour or two a day? And then get back to me and let me see if that helped you. And oftentimes they'll just say, yeah, the problem is gone. It's like you have to understand when you're a devotee, you put yourself in a slightly precarious position because you're removing certain things from your life. And you have to replace them with, you're giving up certain things. So you have to replace it. So if you just give up and don't replace, you may not be that inspired in Krishna consciousness. And then problems will come in. You're trying to control yourself. Before you were a devotee, controlling yourself was not such a maybe top issue in your mind. Oh, I'm eating late at night, this is so bad, or I'm sleeping so much. No, sleeping a lot is good, right? Congratulations, you get to sleep more. That's how we think. You went out, partied, that's good. So when you remove that aspect of your life, and then you're trying to be more austere, if you don't have this source of inspiration, it becomes really difficult. And you become more aware of your conditioning. Because when you take something away, you become more aware of how much you need it or want it, isn't it? So it's a little dangerous to put yourself in that position, where you remove something, but you don't replace it with something. So there's a lot of replacement in studying Prabhupada's books. There's a lot there that will give you juice and inspiration. And to do anything, you need inspiration. And you get a lot of inspiration from Prabhupada's books. Like, if you're going to do something, especially if it's reconditioning activity, it's not natural yet, then you need reasons to do it. If I say, okay, I want you to do this severe exercise regime and you're very lazy, I have to give you really good reasons to do it. So, I give you like a time-lapse photography and I say, if you don't do this, this is what you're going to look like in 10 years. And, it's like you're big and fat and ugly. And you're like, I don't want to look like that. That might inspire you to do those push-ups and sit-ups and the things, even if you're a very lazy person. So it's the same in Krishna consciousness. We understand intellectually, but there has to be that reminder all the time. Why? And so Prabhupada said, he wanted us to read daily. So you get the why. The why reason needs to be there because you're doing austerity. And if there's not a why, then we just feel like, why do this? It's so difficult. And I'm hardly making any advancement because advancement is slow. It's very slow because we're very dirty. You're not going to advance quickly. And it's easy to give up and think, well, this hardly is working and maybe I'll never achieve the goal. And so hearing constantly gives the inspiration and the determination. And that's why I was saying Prabhupada knew that his books were necessary to keep us going because we're so conditioned and we need that. There's a story of one devotee early in the movement who was preaching in Germany, and he said he got a letter from Prabhupada every week, and the inspiration of that letter wore out on the 7th day, and on the 7th day or 8th day he got a new letter, and that pumped him up again, and he went for 7 days, and by the end of the 7th day he was depleted and got a new letter. So especially it works that way when you're young in Krishna consciousness and very conditioned. So of course now we have the books, so that you can say the books are like the letter that gives you the inspiration. So this is a very important point. A lot of times people think they're lazy when they're not lazy. They just don't have good whys. They don't have good reasons to do it. And once you give them a good reason, all of a sudden they're not lazy. Right? So we're getting a lot of reasons from studying Prabhupada's books. Lots of reasons, Like, you're getting old, you're going to die. That's a good reason. You're not going to be happy in the material world. That's a good reason. You'll be happy in, all these things. Austerity brings happiness. Sense gratification ultimately brings depression. Reminder. The unfortunate reality of our existence is that we forget. So, you learn something and you think, I know it, but it kind of gets buried. And it kind of, there's this process of, I don't know exactly how it works, but you hear something and it like goes down into some retention factor, and you have to hear it again to bring it back to your awareness, so it becomes a dominating factor, because conditioning tends to dominate. So you hear something, conditioning tends to rise to the forefront, and what you hear tends to go to the background, isn't it? And so it's very easy to forget, and that's one of the potencies of Maya is covering. You forget. And so Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya means hear it regularly, in Prabhupada's words, every day. So as far as possible, if we can hear every day, it keeps Krishna consciousness vitally alive in our consciousness. And when we don't, it becomes problematic. We will tend to act more under the influence of our conditioning if we're not hearing regularly. And that's the battle we fight. Our conditioning is so subconscious, we act that way, we do things without conscious awareness because it's habit. And a lot of that material conditioning is working against our Krishna consciousness. And so hearing is going against that. It's interfering with that. It's reminding us of what is proper. You have that experience? Yes? It's dangerous. If you want to be on the cutting edge of spiritual life, then you have to be hearing, and not only hearing, you have to be discussing. So Divyanam was saying, well, can you talk about hearing in the association? Well, part of hearing in the association is you hear something, you read something, and you talk about it with someone else, and then it becomes more real and more alive. There's a story that once I was in Los Angeles, and it was late at night, and some devotees had just been in Prabhupada's room, and they had come out. And so generally, if anyone had been with Prabhupada in his room, in the garden, on a morning walk, you had always asked when you saw them, and if you knew they were with Prabhupada, then you would always say, what did Prabhupada say? You have to understand also, there weren't that many books then, and we were very young. So much of what Prabhupada said was new to us. Much of what he said was like, this is the first time we heard that. So we always wanted to know what he said, like what new pearls of wisdom hadn't we heard yet. And so, at this time, devotee came out and Prabhupada said, Prabhupada said, we should all be philosophers. We should always be talking about Krishna. And even sometimes when Prabhupada was giving class, he would read something, he would say something for a few moments, then he would say, discuss. And he would sit there and let them discuss. And this is what the six Goswamis did. There was a place at the Radha Damodar temple. When you're walking from the temple, you go through the Samadhi area, and then you go into Rupa Goswami's courtyard. And between the Samadhi, there's a walkway. And in that walkway, there's a little sitting area. I don't know if it's still there. But it said that's where the Goswamis sat and had their discussions. And that was one of their most important services because they got so much realization from their discussion. And like right now in Vrindavan, Vaisheshika Prabhu, Keshavarya Maharaj, and many devotees, they're reading Prabhupada's books and like 6 hours a day, and they're discussing. They've done this for many years. And just going more deeply into Krishna consciousness. And it's very important. This word deep is very important. You want to go deep because the deeper you go in Krishna consciousness, the further away you are from Maya. There's another thing that's very important that I don't know if you understand this or if it's clear to you, but part of the process of becoming Krishna conscious is to situate yourself in Sattva Gun, and from Sattva Gun, then you can transcend. So it's in the Bhagavatam first canto that this is what we're supposed to do, because Sattva Gun means you're free from sinful activity, you're sense controlled, you're peaceful, you've overcome your passions, your lust and greed. So if you don't, how will you just jump from Tamagun to transcendence? You won't. You have to jump on the train from the platform. So Sattva Gun is like the platform to jump on the train. Now, you could jump on the train when it's moving, but it's a lot more difficult and you could hurt yourself, and it's not the way to do it. So in the Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, there's this verse which describes that by hearing, that what happens by hearing, and eventually you come to Sattva Guna. And you become satisfied, and then kamo lobha dayaschaye, the kama and the lobha, etc., becomes purified. Just by hearing. You know that verse? You know this series of verses, Srinvita Swakata Krishna Punya Shravani, Hridiyantasto Evidani Birunati Svirita. That's one verse. You become purified of anarthas, and then you come to the platform, Sattvam Stita Prasidati. You become situated in Sattva, Kama, Labha, Dayaschaya, and all that becomes nullified. You can see in second canto there's a series of verses, which is all based on hearing, of how it affects you. So hearing keeps you sattvic. So Prabhupada is teaching that we should be sattvic. Prabhupada is teaching that the whole purpose of Daivi Varnashram is to bring everyone up to the Brahminical standard of sattva, and then from there, transcendence. So if you're trying to execute Krishna consciousness, but your consciousness and lifestyle is very rajasic and tamasic, you have a very difficult time, because you can't really succeed from there. Krishna consciousness is meant to help you get beyond those modes. Right? Yes? Yeah. So that's That's right in the Bhagavatam, that this is what hearing does. It brings you to sattva. From sattva you become satisfied, and from sattva you become purified, and then you come to nishta. And that verse basically, it's describing nishta. Nishta, all these anarthas will be nullified, or at least neutralized sufficiently that you can then be steady in your bhakti. Because until we come to nishta, we're not steady. And that means we're being influenced by passion. There's a lot of influence of passion and ignorance, so you can't be steady. So that hearing is very valuable. So that's why hearing is one of the 5 main items of bhakti. So you can't give that. Now, if we could chant pure holy name, then Haribol. If we could chant a pure holy name, then everything could be revealed through that pure holy name. But in order to chant pure holy name, you have to be pure, right? Or some people think, no, I'll just chant, I'll become pure. But if you're chanting and you're in tamagun, your chanting is not very effective. So hearing is purifying, bringing us, and then our chanting becomes more effective. So it's like a foundation to good chanting. Because, you could say, well, I'll just chant. Everything comes from chanting. Which is true, but how can you just chant? You can't just chant without being purified. And so the hearing is putting you in this ideal situation. Does that make sense? So that's the idea of sattva. You're in the sattva is the best place to be for Krishna consciousness, for advancing. And it's when you're in tamas or rajas, that's when you have all this trouble. And you'll come, oh, it's so hard, and complaining, I have so many problems. That's all rajas, particularly tamas. When you have a lot of problems, it's a lot of association with tamas. I can't do this, I don't have determination, I don't feel like it, I'm lazy, I have no attraction, I don't like to chant, I sleep too much, I eat too much. It's all rajas and tamas. So if that's the condition, how you won't even want to chant much, and you won't want to hear much. It's what's the word? Kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's not the right word, but it reinforces itself. Ignorance breeds more ignorance. Then it makes it harder. So, I think a lot of what I'm saying is easily understood just by regularly reading Prabhupada's books, because you'll have the experience of how it's affecting you. And of course, as I was saying, or as Krishna says, Bodhiyantas parasparam, devotees are always conversing amongst themselves, and that's how they're relishing Krishna consciousness. So obviously, what are you going to talk about? You'll talk about what's on your mind. And so if you're reading politics or sports or business or Bollywood or Hollywood or fashion, that's what's on your mind. And that's what you end up talking about. There was, many years ago, there was this famous football player named O.J. Simpson. This might have been, I don't know, this might have been 20 or more years ago. And he was accused of killing his wife or his ex-wife. So it was a very big case. Like if it was just some man, who would care? But he was a football star, as far as I know. And I think this was the first court case that was televised. They didn't ever do this before. And this, you were getting live televised court case. So everyone was watching it because it was the first time a case was televised, and because it was such a big thing, because he was such a well-known person. And there was one spiritual teacher, he's a psychologist, and he was giving a talk. And before he gave the talk, he made a request to everyone. He said, stop watching the O.J. Simpson case, because it's just draining you. He was giving, I forget the context, maybe giving some advice, or maybe he was going to be speaking for a few days. He said, I just ask you, you turn that off. So we can use that as an example, O.J. Simpson or whatever. But there's so many things that absorb us, because that's Maya's trick, News media, cable, When I grew up, there were basically 3 channels. There was TV, I think 3, maybe 4. But some channels specialized in, something. One was for kids and one was for sport. It wasn't. Anyway, there was no cable. So you weren't getting so bombarded. Things were, and the advertising was much more wholesome, and it wasn't so subversive. They advertised their product. They just told you about it. They didn't have, so many sexy girls in bathing suits and like that. And but now it's so easy to be absorbed in other things. And so what are you going to talk about when you meet devotees if you're not hearing? Because whatever we're hearing tends to go to the forefront, isn't it? That's what we think about. So remember the statement of Prabhupada, we're philosophers, we should always be talking philosophy. And not only that, we should always be seeing the world philosophically, because that's how you'll talk philosophy. And how will you see the world philosophically unless you're hearing? Because Prabhupada is giving you this Shastra Chakshus, this vision to see through Shastra. Otherwise we have this problem because of our conditioning. We see everything through this lens contaminated by the modes of nature. Rather than seeing it in a Krishna conscious perspective, we may see it in a material perspective. And so then what do we talk about? Again, we talk about just the way we're seeing the world. But if we're seeing through Shastra, then we get realizations. Oh, I was reading, and then I was looking at the world, and I was thinking this, and I got this realization. And so that keeps us alive in Krishna consciousness, that we're always looking at things philosophically. And some of us have more of that nature to be analytical and to look at things philosophically. Some of us don't. But that's what Prabhupada's books do to us. And just by reading them, it forces you to look philosophically. Well, my daughter she must have been around 10. No more than 11. In her school, she was going to school in Mayapur, and part of her curriculum was they would go through Bhakti Shastri, just as part of their daily curriculum. So at this time, she was reading Nectar of Devotion. So she's like 11 at the most. And she started asking me questions because she was being exposed to this book, and she'd never been exposed to it before. And I could see that her mind was working in a completely different way from trying to understand Nectar of Devotion. It just like put her in this very philosophical, analytical mood. It was totally different than her normal frequency of thinking. And she was still young, but she was thinking, like talking to her was like talking to an adult. She was just trying to understand Shastra. So that made a deep impression on me. And as we were discussing Nectar Devotion, I was thinking, this is amazing, that even for a young girl, it's putting her in a very philosophical mood by reading this. And she's discussing, and what about this, and what does he mean by this, and how is it like this? And her mind was just going. So that's what Prabhupada wanted us to be like, always thinking, asking questions, discussing. And so that's the value of the Sangha. Well, I may realize something, but you realize something I didn't realize, or together we're discussing, a new realization comes out. And some people realize things by speaking. Did you know that? Some will realize by writing, some more by hearing, some more by speaking. So maybe if you're a hearer, then in the discussion you're happy to hear more than speak. If you're a speaker, you like speaking. People who speak a lot, sometimes they're just speaking to clarify their ideas. That's how they clarify. So they're not really speaking to you, per se. They're just speaking so they can get their ideas. Well, if they're speaking to you something transcendental, that's good for you. But they want to speak it to get it clear in their head, because that's how they get it clear. So for all of those of you who get clear or get realization by speaking, then sharing is very important for you. And teaching is very important. And those who get realization by hearing, then be around the people who are speaking. So Prabhupada's program in the early days was morning class, evening class. Morning, Bhagavatam. When I joined, it was Gita in the morning. We didn't know the Bhagavatam. And then Gita in the evening, and then Krishna book. And that was like morning and evening here. And Prabhupada said 9 to 5 are banking hours. So do your work during the day, and then here in the morning, here in the evening. And so in the very, very early days, just as many people were at the temple in the evening as in the morning. It was just like a morning program, evening program, equally attended. It was normal. That was just the program. Everybody went. Like, as many as more, even more, because some people would miss Mangalarti. But everyone was up in the evening. And we called it the ISKCON sandwich. And so work was the middle of the sandwich, the seva, and then the hearing and chanting. And Prabhupada said, if you don't read my books, you'll just become like karmis and fruitive workers. Because that's the nature of Maya. That's what Maya does. It makes us work hard for accumulation of things we don't need, because that's what this culture is. And Prabhupada said, if you don't read my books, that's where you'll end up. You know this purport? He said you'll end up simply eating and sleeping. In other words, eating and sleeping means Hiranyakashipu, eating, sleeping, and making money. You'll end up being another Hiranyakashipu. Gold in a soft bed. Your whole life will just be material if you're not reading, because that's our conditioning, that's the frequency we live on. And so Prabhupada's books are interfering with that frequency. And he said, just as animals become strong by eating grains, then we become strong by hearing. And then in that purport, that's what he said, and if we don't, we will just fall down to eating and sleeping. We say fall down from where we already had come from. So we've been elevated, then we'll come down. So hearing is, again, I think this underscores what hearing is doing. It's elevating us out of the modes of nature. When you fall into passion and ignorance, then eating and sleeping, working hard, getting ahead, so-called success, that's all we're interested in. Sense great gratification of the body. If you think about material life, all it is, it's about feeling good, emotionally and sensually, and mentally and intellectually. That's all it's about. It's just confined to this body, making this body feel good. And we've dedicated our whole life to making this body feel good. Isn't it? It's interesting to think about it. And what do we say? Rishikesha, Rishikena Sevanam. These senses belong to Krishna. Krishna consciousness Krishna consciousness is making Krishna feel good. Right? And so if we're not Krishna conscious, then we're completely absorbed in this body. And it's always like, how do I feel? Let's do that, it'll make me feel good. Let's go ski down a mountain. That's like, it's exciting. Or let's go to Las Vegas, It's all about feeling good. Right? And about the tongue, gratifying, let's go out to the restaurant, gratify the tongue. Let's go to the movies, gratify the eyes. Let's go here, So Prabhupada was very concerned that we wouldn't fall back into the life that we had left. And so the idea of his books was part of the idea. That's one of the processes, but the idea of his books is to help prevent that. What's the medical term? When you have a disease, you overcome it and you go back into it. Starts with an R.
Relapse.
Relapse, yeah. He didn't want us to relapse. Prabhupada was very concerned about relapses. You can see that if you study how he dealt with devotees, you could see that relapses were a huge concern for him. Like it would be for a doctor. Don't do this, don't eat this anymore, you have to exercise, you have to do this, you have to bathe, keep clean. Otherwise you have a relapse. So Prabhupada understood our disease really well. And he would see symptoms of the disease, and he would be concerned. This is This is a symptom of relapse. Devotees weren't getting up early, weren't chanting their rounds, they weren't inspired. Prabhupada wrote a letter, he said, I see now we've lost our enthusiasm. Symptom of relapse. Brahmachari's growing hair, symptom of relapse. Not getting up in the morning, symptom of relapse. He was always catching it. So there are symptoms, and if the symptoms are there, then it must be a lack of certain practices. So Prabhupada would go back and say, you must not be doing this, this, and this, because the symptoms are there. Does that make sense? Hare Krishna. So you have any questions? Or comments? Or
so we have about 30 minutes to ask questions. Yes.
You mentioned Nishta?
Nishta.
What is Nishta?
Nishta is a Sanskrit word which means steady. It's a stage of bhakti. So, in Nectar of Instruction and Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll find stages of bhakti. And the stage before Nishta is Anartha Nivritti. And that means the unwanted things, the lust, the greed, and so many unwanted things are starting to go away. And so after they go away, then you become steady. Because you can't become steady because they're there. Lust, greed, anger, envy, jealousy, it's making us unsteady. Before you get to Anartha Nivritti, it's called bhajana kriya, which means practice, sadhana bhakti, regular practice. So you're doing regular practice, which purifies you. When you're sufficiently purified, you come to nishta. That's steady. That's nishta. It's considered when your bhakti is not motivated by material desire. It's also nishta. But the word itself means steady. It also means faith. So faith, in the stage of nishta, your faith is strong now. Before that, it could be a little pliable. Yes?
So, in your talk, you mentioned quite a few times about hearing, and then also we are talking about reading. So, are they interchangeable? Like, hearing is same as reading, or it gives same impact, or both are important?
I once read something. Unfortunately, I can't remember it, but it was something about the effects of hearing. This wasn't from a devotee. This was just some scientific research about the effects of hearing audible sound over reading it. And it had different effect. Apparently more effective.
Hearing is more effective.
When you're reading by yourself, you can stop and contemplate and take notes and write realizations and go back over it. If you're hearing in a group, so there is that difference. So they're all good. When Prabhupada said, read my books, he didn't specify that you have to read with somebody and aloud. But that's there in the Bhagavatam class.
But like hearing from Srila Prabhupada and reading...
Oh, reading, like hearing a lecture?
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing. Reading, it's all good. Reading is a little bit more contemplative because you think about it. You go over it. What does that mean? You reference another shloka, you look it up. So you get, reading, at least for me, it can be an exercise in going very deeply. I tend to often read on one topic to understand it more deeply. So I'll research something on Veda base, get some words in research, and Prabhupada said hundreds of things about it. And so I won't get that out of a lecture, but I'll get other things out of a lecture. More inspiration, often, from a lecture. And hearing Prabhupada's voice and words just cuts I don't know how to say it, cuts all the dirt, all the junk. Like it's like an explosion. It's like... I listen, I have this little player, so I often listen in the morning when I get up, when I'm getting ready, and then sometimes after I get ready, or if I'm stretching or something. Or now that you have that thing up there, when I can listen while I'm doing that. So it's more explosive. For me, anyway, it's more explosive than reading. It shakes me up more. It's like, because you actually hear him say the same, because I may read it, and so I read it, I may not understand always the importance of it. When Prabhupada says something, it's important, you'll hear it in his tone of voice. So it does have that effect. So I recommend it. I've always recommended to my disciples, if you really want to understand the Sankirtan movement, listen to Prabhupada's morning walks, because the morning walks tend to be often philosophical debates or discussions relevant to preaching, and you really get the sense of Prabhupada as the general, and the general's giving the mission. And often they would talk about what the people are saying and how we're being attacked, and then Prabhupada would come back, and this is what you say. And so you really get this sense of being there in the 70s and what it was like, and it really helps you understand what was going on in the heart of the devotees. Because these exchanges are like, Prabhupada's the general, and they're he's the commander-in-chief, and they're his generals, and he's inspiring them. He's giving them the strategy. So I find that's important. I think becoming Krishna conscious and understanding Prabhupada, they need to go together, and understanding his mission, because he's the one we're serving. And by serving him, by understanding his mission and serving him properly, then you get so much mercy. Because as we said last night, if you can please Prabhupada, you're in with Krishna automatically. What an easier way to be in with Krishna than to please Prabhupada. And even reading his books is pleasing. But if you go more deeply into his mission, you'll get that from morning walks, you'll also get that from lectures, conversations. You'll get this sense of urgency, you'll get the power of the message. They're all good. They all go together. Like, should I chant Sanskrit or not? It's nice. Learn the verses, it's nice. If you have that inclination. Everything helps. So, and I think also it will depend on the individual. Someone may say, oh, when I read I fall asleep, but if I listen I can stand up, I can do something. But of course then you may be distracted a little bit. Reading, you can concentrate more. But maybe you can't concentrate when you read. So, everyone's different. I'm going to answer Himanshu's question. Thank you for inspiring. I want to ask one question. That is, Anartha Vritti came along with hearing or reading Shastra by owner. We need something special. He's asking, how does Anartha Vritti come? So we were saying, the Bhagavatam is saying that you advance by hearing, and of course the Shastra says you could become purified by any process, any one. But although that's true, and there are examples of that, Prabhupada gave all of those processes and asked us to follow all of them, because it has a synergistic effect. So if we do a full morning program, the temple becomes the holy place. We do deity worship, we do chanting, we do hearing, we do Bhagavatam, we do Sangha. So we do them all. So we can see that they're all important. So it's a synergistic effect. And you could say, okay, just by hearing you'll come to Anartha Vritti. It'll take longer if you leave out the other four processes. Yes?
Yeah, so just by this point, thought came to mind. You mentioned about chanting. That, okay, so, chanting pure holy names can do everything. But then how to do this is by reading and come to that point. So
it's a paradox.
Yeah, so there are like 5 principal items in 64 devotional. So are other items also connected like in the similar way, or it's just chanting and hearing? Or
no, everything is beneficial. But but those 5 are foundational. You don't want to give up those 5. Others, it's all helpful, but
So, like,
may
what
not.
inspires reading? I mean, if reading inspires you to chant better, then what inspires reading?
Sometimes, if you're a preacher or a book distributor, that inspires reading because you have to know. And you have to get the power and strength to go out and approach people who aren't interested. They're trying to sell me something. What does a man who has everything buy? What does a man who has the holy name buy? Who's satisfied? Mm-hmm. What was the last thing you said?
So, like you mentioned that our reading inspire our chanting to chant purely. So, what inspires our reading and
inspires our,
five processes?
Well, also a lot of inspiration we're going to get from other people who are doing what we're not so inclined to do. So, if I see you're very happy and you're reading Prabhupada's books and you're inspired, that's going to inspire me. I think, I must be missing something because you look so inspired, so happy, and I know sometimes I'll hear a devotee give a lecture and it'll be very shastric and quoting a lot of Sanskrit, and I get inspired. Oh, he's really learning Prabhupada's books. I want to learn that as well. But I think there is the idea that even if you're not inspired, you just make a time to do it every day. So one of the easiest ways to read every day, if you're not inspired, is to set a time and just no matter what, read. It's like from this time to this time I'm going to read, whether I want to or not, whether I'm interested or not, I'm just going to do it. And I do it every day, and then gradually I see the benefit, and then I look forward to it, and then it becomes easier to do. And maybe some days take a vacation and just read all day. Like you get off from work, so I'm going to take a vacation, with my family. Sometimes we need to take a vacation, just read, read. Just sit down and read the whole Bhagavad Gita. Just read the verses. How long does that take? 3 hours maybe? Do that once in a while. That's amazing. I mean, just reading Krishna's words is amazing. Even one chapter is amazing. It seems like such a simple thing. How amazing could it be? Read one chapter. Well, read one. It's amazing. Or read some story from Shastra. It seems so simple. Like it's just like a story. How powerful can a story be? But it's Krishna. Bhagavatam is Krishna. Or Chaitanya Charitamrita, any book. So sometimes you have to force yourself to get the inspiration, to get the taste. Then I would ask myself this question: how much time do I spend on the internet reading things not related to Krishna? And how could I minimize that, maximize my time reading? Yes?
In the 10 offenses, like one more offense we will say like inattentive chanting.
Yes.
So, and also I heard that inattentive hearing is also an offense.
Yeah.
So in that case, because reading is, yes, we have to spend particularly some time to read, sit and read. But hearing we can do whenever, like while traveling or while doing some other work, so we can be able to hear. So, but sometimes it is not so attentive. So because some work, we want to rewind and hear it again. So
okay, that's a good question. What I would say is, any hearing is good, but if that's the only hearing you do is inattentive hearing, then that's not good. There should be some time that's devoted to, a little more serious study, or a little more serious, where you can read and take notes or something. But if you're cooking, at least you'll get something, or you're washing clothes or whatever. You'll get something, will get in there. You obviously won't get as much as if you're sitting in the class, taking notes. But what is not proper is if, let's say, I have a lecture on, where I'm listening to Prabhupada, and you come over, and then we start talking, and the lecture's in the background. It's just turn it off. It's disrespectful. And you're not listening at all. Have a kirtan, it's okay. So, that's not right. And I often say, because I believe this is very important, that it's not stereotyped. So what inspires you may not inspire me. So maybe hearing someone reading Bhagavatam, like we have Keshav Bharati Maharaj now is reading all the Prabhupada's books. So you'll be able to hear all the Prabhupada. So for you, maybe hearing as much, just listening to him read, is much more effective than reading yourself. And it's not right or wrong. It's just, that's how you're constituted, or that's the position of life you're in right now, where maybe you're so busy, you don't know how to relax anymore, And maybe when you're older and retired and you don't have anything to do, then sitting and reading is it's much more suited. So I don't think we should make hard and fast rules, but I like to go by what works for you practically and internally, what inspires you or helps you the most. Otherwise, you try to imitate what someone else is doing, but it may not work. It's like eating, I don't like beets, so if you like beets, and I think I should eat beets because she likes beets, but I don't like beets. I don't know why, I just don't. So it's artificial. Why should I eat them? They're good for you, you should eat them. Okay. But why don't I just eat something else that's good for me that I like? Right? Because if you tell me to eat beets, I'll eat one piece, and I'll turn into a stick if all I eat is beets. I don't like them. So it doesn't make sense. Of course, if you want to go on a diet, it's a good idea. Just put on your plate everything you don't like. And don't put any of her ice cream on your plate. She made ice cream last night from whipped cream. Okay, there's the guilty one. It was like the first time I had ice cream in 3 yugas. And Vaikuntha Prabhu, my neighbor, was here, and I challenged him to take 1 spoonful of that ice cream. He failed. Wasn't possible. Yes?
Thank you very much for the class notes. Somewhat unrelated question is about chanting. I was listening to one of the videos that you had posted about good japa and bad japa.
Mm-hmm.
And you must remember which one. So,
I don't remember. As soon as I give the video, I forget what I said. There's 1,600 of them. I have to go back and listen to them, remember what I said. Yeah, but what did I say?
So you were saying something about how we are here in this world, and we must have done some bad japa in the past.
Oh, yeah, that was kind of a joke also.
And if we continue to do that, then again we'll have to come back. So wanted to get some of your thoughts on how we can improve our japa and not fall prey to that.
Well, we know what bad japa is. Bad japa is it's like a bad relationship. Like in a bad relationship, you lose your feeling towards that person, and you lose your empathy towards that person. You don't care. You don't like being with them. You don't really care what happens to them. You think I'd be happier without you. Do you ever feel that way about japa? I just don't care if I chant. I have this little joke. You talk to your bead bag and you go, I don't really like you. You're kind of boring, and I'm just going to put you down. So, because Krishna is in his name, that means a holy name is a person, that means there's a relationship. And so we see all these symptoms of a bad relationship with bad japa. It's like, you ever see a man and a woman that they're married for so many years and they really don't like one another? They don't talk. And when they talk, it's there's no emotion there. It's just practical. And I think you should turn right here. And that's it. And they don't talk. It's like, okay. There's a restaurant over there. You know, there's like no connection. So sometimes we chant and there's no connection. There's no emotion. It's just official. Like I'm you know, we're not breaking up for the kids, but there's no relationship. We're just doing it. And then japa becomes like that. Then you think, what's a good relationship? You like to be with a person. There's a lot of emotion and affection. So that's good japa. You want to chant. There's emotion, there's affection, there's connection. There's the desire to serve. There's empathy. What's empathy? Krishna wants us to go back to Godhead. He's waiting for us. That's empathy. Prabhupada wants us to be Krishna conscious. He came here. That's empathy. It's not just about me. Well, if I don't like it, I won't chant well. No, there's other people involved here. It's not just about you like it or don't like it. Like they say in traditional village life, you grow up thinking what you're going to be for the village, not what you want to do or don't want to do. Right? So this is an important thought. It's like, well, I don't really feel like chanting. Okay, don't chant. So I won't chant. Or I don't feel devotional, so I won't chant devotionally. No, it's not just about you. There's a lot more. Krishna wants you. Your guru wants you. Prabhupada, you know, so think of it as a relationship. And so in Krishna, this is the way, this is, I think, the essence, or one of the essences of japa. We turned our back to Krishna. We're here trying to imitate Krishna, and the whole time Krishna still loves us. He doesn't give up on us, and he wants us to come back. So think of it like this. Krishna is saying, I love you. And japa is just a means of trying to reciprocate with that love. Okay, if you love me, I need to love you back. And so chanting is the process that will help me love you back. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, please let me reciprocate with the love you've given me. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram. I want to love you. You love me, and I turn my back to you all the time. And say, what kind of person am I? Please help me reciprocate with the love you're giving me. I don't have that love, and I want it, or I have a little bit, and I want to give more and more and more. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, please help me love you. Help me reciprocate. Help me forgive me for what I did. Help me reinstate myself and accept me as your devotee, and so on. That's what it's all about. So if you're in that mood when you're chanting, that's close relationship. If you're in the other mood, it's like two people who want to be divorced but are staying together for the kids. So you could call it, are you chanting divorce japa, or are you chanting good relationship japa? And I think a lot of us chant divorce japa. We're staying together for the kids. Why are you chanting? Because I promised. Any other reason? No. If I didn't promise, I wouldn't chant. You don't want to be on that level. Does that make sense?
Related to the chanting, say if the mind is all stressed out because of something happening at work or family or whatever, so at that time if you do the chanting just so that to peace, to help God, to ask God to help you in calming your mind. So is it a good japa or is it a bad japa? Because even at that time, because the mind is stressed out, the mind will not be focusing. It will focus on chanting, but at the same time it will go and oscillate and start thinking about whatever is bothering. So it will oscillate between chanting and whatever is bothering. So at that time, is it a good japa or is it bad japa? Or should we not be doing chanting at that time, and should we do something else to peace our mind before we do the chanting?
Yes, you should. Well, let's ask that question. Let's say you're a heart surgeon, and it's time to go into surgery, and you just spoke to your husband, and he just yelled at you for banging the car. You left him a message that you banged the car, and then he yells at you. Now you have to go and do a surgery. You're going to have to calm yourself down so you can focus. You have to. So it's the same with japa. In order to chant japa properly, you have to be in a certain mood. And if you're not in that mood, like we were saying last night, with the japa affirmations. They get you in that mood. There's a guitarist named Santana. He's I think born in Mexico. He's famous, one of the most famous guitarists in America, Carlos Santana. And a commercial came up on Facebook or YouTube of him giving a class in guitar. And he said, it's not just about me showing you how to play it, but it's feeling it, and then when you feel it, you can play it, because especially guitar. Guitar is different than piano, because with the piano, you don't have much control. It's either on or off. Guitar, it's like sitar. You can play it. There's loud, soft, and all these different tones on the guitar. So he said, you feel it. And so it's like, okay, if I'm going to perform tonight and I'm not in the mood, even though I have the ability, it's going to be difficult. I'm not going to feel it, and nobody's going to feel it. Like, if you're a performer and you're performing almost every night, it's really difficult. Because you have to be, you can't just mess around during the day, because when you come in the evening, you have to give all your energy. You have to have a voice. You have to be awake, energized. You have to be in the right mood, and that's when you perform the best. If you're a speaker and you don't want to be there, I don't want to talk to these people, they bore me, I don't even like the topic, even though you know everything about it, it's not going to come out well. It's the same with japa. There has to be a mood. So if we're not in the mood, it's not going to translate properly. It's like let's say you're in this bad mood and you're supposed to go out to dinner with your husband, and you made this date, and everything. You have to, if you don't calm down, it's just going to be hell for you and him. It's not going to be the right mood for that. You might call him up and say, I'm too much in anxiety. I'll drive you crazy. I'm not even hungry. I can't eat. So once you enter, like what we were talking about in terms of what japa is, if we can get more in that mood before we begin, then it's very easy. But if we're not in that mood, it's like we're walking up a hill with 100 pounds on our shoulder. So if you can chant at another time, or you can calm yourself down, then yes, you should. Because it's just going to be in your mind while you're chanting, and it's going to be working against you. So it's like you're with your husband, and he's talking to you, and you can't listen because you're thinking about whatever it is that's causing you anxiety. Isn't it? So it's really, really important. So I've been focusing on teaching this lately, that enter the mood before you chant. Feel it before you chant. And then, so when you begin chanting, you're there. You're not waiting for 8 rounds to get there, or 16. My 16th round, I'm finally feeling it. Now I'm finished. So that's very, very important. If you can, maybe you don't have time and you have to chant. And you try your best to say, okay, visualize taking all that's in your head, put it in a little suitcase, close the suitcase and say, I'm going to chant without those thoughts. When I finish, I'll go back to the suitcase and I'll put it back again and I'll deal with it. And it's like, psychologically these things work, where you visualize taking something and just like, take this, put it in a suitcase, put it on an airplane, send it to New York, it's gone. When you want it back, call the pilot, he'll bring it back. So it's kind of, you just get it out of your mind somehow. That's really important. Because much of the battle we have when we're chanting is because we've allowed all these things to be in our mind. And so basically, unless you get some real mercy, it's really, if that's all there and it's very intense, it's likely it's going to be there for your whole japa. Which kind of ruins it, doesn't it? It's one time, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was talking with Prabhupada about reducing sleeping, and Prabhupada said it takes practice. Like he gets up in 2 or 3 hours to translate. And, maybe what Prabhupada meant is it was hard in the beginning, and now through practice I can do it. So this also takes practice to be able to just like, zoom, just throw everything off, leave it at the door so I can go and chant. I mean, you'd be amazed, but so many devotees, and when I was, and even now, but sometimes more so when I was a manager, like I'm asked to do a program at night, and there's all these crazy things I'm dealing with right up to the class, that are unresolved, and then I have to come to class and just, and like totally forget about it, which is great. I mean, I love doing it, because who wants to keep thinking about all these things, way until the evening and going to bed? So it's a skill we need to learn to do. It's like Prabhupada said, 9 to 5. Okay, so deal with all those things 9 to 5. And then turn it off so that I can focus on my sadhana. It's important. No, I'm not saying it's easy. I made a daily video, I don't know if you saw it, about the fact that Krishna consciousness is not easy, or maybe it hasn't come out yet. Today is what, 21? Yeah, 21st. It's probably come out already. And I just wanted to make this point, because a lot of times devotees will say, well, it's so difficult. It's so hard to control my mind, or so hard when I chant to be focused, or so hard to control my lust or my greed or whatever. And no doubt, it's hard. And I'm the first to agree with you. But I don't think we should use that as a rationale for not being strong in our spiritual life. But we can use it to our advantage, because when we recognize it's difficult, then we should recognize it's going to require effort every day, and I can't stop that effort. Instead of, it's difficult, I give up. Right? So those are the two responses to difficult. So yes, it's difficult. We're conditioned, but why is it difficult? Well, Prabhupada once said, if you try for first class, you'll get second class. If you try for second class, you'll get fifth class. And my experience is, when you try for fifth class, it's really difficult. When you try for second class, it's pretty easy. Because you don't care about all this, How should we do it? Should we do it this way or that? Oh, just whatever. But first class, no, it has to be done like this, exactly like this, and you need these materials, and this is the deadline. It's really, really hard. You have high standards. So speak about loving Krishna? That's like very high standard, right? So yeah, it's going to be difficult, obviously, Is it difficult to make $1 billion? More difficult than it is to make 10, obviously. So now you set out to make $1 billion, and then you see me next year and you go, oh, it's so hard. And I go, of course it's hard. You have to expect that. But if you go in expecting it's hard, but you're inspired to be a billionaire for whatever reason, then you don't see the difficulties. So it's said that strong people will see the goal, and weak people will see the difficulties towards the goal. So if we value Krishna consciousness, and it's important to us, then we won't say things like, it's so hard. It's so hard means we're seeing the difficulty more than the goal. We'll say, I want Krishna consciousness, and the fact that it's hard is just taken for granted. Of course it's hard, but I don't focus on that it's hard, I focus on what I want. Like, if you put that ice cream and made an obstacle course, then Mahatma and Kolik Shekhar, they would get it. They wouldn't say, oh, this obstacle course is hard. They'll just knock through it, right? Because they want it. And that's the way life is. When you want something, you do not notice the difficulty. The difficulties are just what you have to go through to get it. But when you don't want it, you start making excuses, and then you focus on the difficulties. So yes, it's hard to do these things, but it's necessary. And once we accept that it's going to be hard, then when it's hard, it's not a problem anymore. It's just, yeah, of course. You want to do a PhD? It's going to be hard? Yeah. It's going to be hard. If you don't want a hard life, don't do a PhD. You want to be a doctor, be on call? Yeah, that's going to be hard. Is that what you want to do? Well, as long as you know, then you're okay. So that's what we have to do. So yeah, calming your mind when you're disturbed, it is difficult. But it's what we have to do. Is that all right?
Just one helpful hints that I heard, Maharaj, so just I want to share that.
Yes.
Regarding the reading books, actually we usually saw the book's size. So by seeing the size itself, we don't get inspired to read it. Okay, when are we going to finish it? So, but what we should not start reading by thinking when I'm going to finish it. We should understand that we just want to relish, and whatever that I study, just try to grab those points.
And then you'll probably relish it so much that when you get to the end, you wish it didn't end. Also before television, before the internet, then there was television. Before television was radio. Before that, there was nothing. So you can imagine that telling stories and reading books was the main thing everyone did. And even if you want to have some fun, look at American television from like the 40s, 50s, and 60s, even 70s, and you will see it's much different. You can just see people were smarter, they were more articulate, there wasn't all this social media distraction that's taking people away from reading traditional literature, classics, literature that nourishes the mind. So it's interesting. Sometimes these things come up, and these were like the shows I watched as a kid, and I'm always amazed because I forgot of how different people were. They were just the way they spoke. It was so much different, and the way we speak now, and the commercials and ads and those fake voices they use, and it was so different then. And you can see there was just a level of intelligence and articulation that doesn't exist now. Even with TV, there are only 4 channels. And I grew up around the time TV, started. It was black and white TV. And I remember, my parents would listen to radio was still a thing, listen to radio. And so, it was just books. Books were the thing, And in village time in India, the pundits would recite stories, and everybody would know them. So, I think that's part of the problem we have now, where this passionate society makes it hard to sit down and read, because we're used to 3-minute videos, just, with lots of music and pictures, and and it's really, really bad for concentration, because videos are all if you count when in your average documentary or movie, count how many seconds, especially in a documentary, before it changes. It's usually 2 to 3 seconds they'll change. Like Discovery Channel, climbing the Himalayas, and then go every 3 seconds it changes, and real life doesn't change like that. So it creates an addiction for watching and excitement. Like if I go to India, they'll say, "Where's the PowerPoint?" They all want to see, if I give a talk, they want to see a PowerPoint. And I don't like PowerPoint so much. I like to just be the entertainment myself. But they're used to that stimulation, especially. Much more than Americans I've seen. I don't know why. Maybe it's Bollywood or something, but there's a little more addiction to entertainment. And so I've seen that even in speaking, they want to be entertained. I mean, it's okay. Nothing wrong with it, but it's just, you can get addicted to this. And all of this is going to affect our japa, because now we're used to so much stimulation, and then just calm down. It's hard. You got, in India, everybody has 2 phones because they go out of one area, and so they need another. And there's, in India, there are phone ads everywhere. It's and that distraction is, especially young people, it's unhealthy. especially for us who need to concentrate, right? So, someday there's going to be a 12-step program for smartphones. They'll come in. I used to be a smartphone addict. I've been free of my smartphone for 2 years now.
It's a small business strategy, I should think. Definitely.
At least for kids, how to get your kids off of social media.
Because
What?
parents are struggling, everyone's struggling with this, screen addiction.
How do you get them off? It's real easy. Don't give it to them in the first place. That should work. Of course, they want it because you're on it. Yeah. I mean, it's good. Just have Prabhupada's books on it. No SIM card. I think there was someone who said something like, he said, I don't have my smartphone with me. He said, if you want me, just call me when I'm home. Or call me at the office. That's the way it used to be. Leave a message, And before the smartphone came out, the mobile phone came out, they did some research and they asked people, we're thinking of this idea of a wireless phone, you could carry it anywhere. What do you think of it? And they all said, I don't need it. I'll just get my calls when I go home. Everybody said that. Nobody could conceive. Nobody needed it. Life was fine without it. And actually, having grown up without it, computers, my first computer was 1991. I was 41 years old. So I went 41 years without a computer, and my first phone came later. So having grown up without it, my experience of it is it hasn't necessarily made things easier. In many ways, it's made it much more complicated because it's enabled us to do more. So it's not really easier, it's actually more complicated. I can do things that I couldn't do before. So it's definitely allowed me to do that, but it's also allowed me to do like 20 things a day more that I couldn't do all, and kind of doing them all at once. So it's made things, in a sense, more difficult. You wanted to lay something out. You used to go to an office and pay people. You wanted to do recording, you went to a recording studio. You wanted to make a video, you hired a company. Now you just do it all yourself, right? And so, it's like, it's great, but, you do the video, then you do the music, then you do the graphics, you know how to do it all, and you're working 18 hours a day. And you could never afford to produce a video before anyway. Now you've got a camera for $1,000 and that is making videos better than, the 20,000, it's like. So it's all great if used under control, but it just puts too much possibilities, so we're all working a lot. And learning complicated software, it's like, it takes a while, right? To do something simple, first you got to learn the complicated software. Sometimes it's just complicated to get it to work, isn't it? Oh, it doesn't work with this operating system, and I got to call the guys, and I found out there's a bug in it, and then they got to get the upgraded. It's like, to make it simple, sometimes it's not simple. So we're going to do Dhammarastika?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to do Dhammarastika. We say goodbye to all of you. And tomorrow morning we start at what time?
Talk's going to start around 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I'm going to I do classes on the weekend. So at 8 o'clock tomorrow I'll do a class on Facebook. If any of you want to come or watch it, I'll be sitting right here. We've been talking about women, I don't know if you call it women's issues, but women's place in Krishna consciousness in the world today, how to deal with that, and challenges women have being in a society that's much different today than it was traditionally. And we're going to talk about some interesting things tomorrow, about opposite things Prabhupada said. He would say this, and he would say the total opposite, and why he said opposite, and how to balance it. So I'll do that here. I can do it in this room if you want to come. Yeah. And otherwise you can watch on Facebook. And we'll see everyone out there tomorrow, and